I'm Michelle, 33 now, but sometimes I still feel like that 17-year-old girl standing on my parents' porch with a duffel bag. Back then, I believed family would fight for me even when I messed up. Instead, one winter night, they gave me 10 minutes to pack and a bus ticket. 20 years later, they walked into my life again, not with an apology, but with a lawsuit over my son. What happened next stunned everyone in the room. I had built a quiet, steady life since that night. I rarely spoke about the past, not to colleagues, not to neighbors, sometimes not even to my own child. But a part of me kept the memory like a small stone in my pocket, heavy, unnoticed, shaping the way I walked. The Springfield Memorial Gala was supposed to be about our foundation's work for teen mothers, not about me. Yet as I watched the RSVP list appear on my screen, I knew my parents were coming. Before I go on, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been dismissed or pushed aside by people who should have protected you, hit subscribe. You'll want to see where this story goes. The gala's ballroom glittered like a scene from an old movie, white orchids on every table, crystal chandeliers casting soft light over polished silver. I arrived early with my son, now a young doctor in scrubs, and our mentor Lance, who had stood in for every father figure moment I'd needed. We rehearsed his speech, arranged place cards, double-checked the media setup. Outwardly calm inside, I felt the tremor of a coming storm. I caught a glimpse of my parents when they entered. My mother wore a vintage Chanel suit she'd saved for special victories. My father adjusted his cufflinks Harvard class ring flashing under the lights. They moved like royalty toward table 1, the table we'd reserved front and center. They didn't see me watching from across the room, or maybe they did and didn't care. Around us, donors chatted, staff, hurried waiters carried trays of sparkling water. A string quartet played something elegant. My son practiced his opening lines under his breath. Lance checked his watch and gave me a small nod. It felt like the air before a thunderclap. As the MC welcomed everyone, my parents laughed softly with an investor they clearly wanted to impress. They had no idea how much of the evening had been shaped by the girl they'd left behind. I smoothed the edges of the invitation cards, remembering my father's words from that winter night. "You made your bed, Michelle. Lie in it. I had and built a home around it too." The spotlight shifted to the podium. My son would speak soon. My parents were still smiling, unaware of the documents resting in Lance's briefcase, unaware of the video cued on the screen behind them. I stood in the wings, heart steady not from anger, but from the certainty of what was about to unfold. I reached for a glass of water and caught my reflection in the silver tray a waiter carried by older, calmer, stronger. The girl on the porch had vanished. The woman at the gala was ready. This was still only the beginning of the night, but already the room felt like a held breath. I turned back toward the stage as my son stepped forward. Somewhere deep inside, the stone I'd carried for 20 years shifted just a little. Tonight, without raising my voice, I would let them see exactly what they had thrown away. From my spot near the curtains, I could hear the murmur of the crowd forks against china, the low hum of polite conversation. My parents' laughter carried above it, bright and brittle like glass. They didn't glance my way once, but I could feel their presence like a draft on my skin. 20 years had passed, yet the same cold air from that porch night seemed to have followed me here. I walked between tables, checking centerpieces, a habit more than a need. People greeted me warmly, donors, hospital board members, a few former scholarship recipients, but I kept my replies short. Tonight wasn't about handshakes or small talk. It was about showing, not telling. Lance moved through the room too, a quiet anchor in a navy suit. He didn't have to say anything. His steady glance told me everything was in place. My son fiddled with his notes at the podium, then slipped them into his pocket. "I'll just speak from the heart," he whispered. I squeezed his shoulder, a small gesture to steady both of us. At table 1, my mother leaned toward a reporter, probably offering a quote about family legacy or giving back. My father's fingers drummed the tablecloth in a rhythm I remembered from childhood dinners when he was impatient. They were already rehearsing their performance, unaware the stage was mine now. The MC began introductions, thanking donors, announcing the evening's agenda. Lights dimmed slightly. The screen behind the podium flickered with the foundation's logo. I breathed in slowly, grounding myself in the scent of orchids and polished wood, in the warmth of the room that had once felt so cold. For a moment I thought of the girl who had stepped off the bus 2 decades ago, snow on her hair, no one waiting. I had learned then that silence can be power, that dignity doesn't need an audience. Tonight that lesson would echo back to the people who had taught it so cruelly. Across the room, a photographer lifted his camera. The flash popped, catching my parents mid-laugh. The image burned in my mind, two people basking in borrowed admiration, oblivious to the truth about to unfold. I smoothed the edge of my dress, straightened my back. The MC's voice rose, "Please welcome Dr. Harrison." My son stepped into the light. I felt the room shift as heads turned, applause rising. My parents straightened, expecting his words to be theirs. They still didn't see me in the shadows, and I didn't need them to. I was exactly where I belonged. The hush that followed was almost beautiful. I clasped my hands loosely in front of me, a quiet signal to myself. It's time. The girl on the porch had waited long enough. The applause faded as my son adjusted the microphone. His voice carried steady and warm, filling the ballroom with stories of hope and second chances. At table 1, my parents sat up straighter, smiling at each other as if his speech were a tribute to them. I watched them closely from the wings, my heart steady, but my hands cool. He spoke of a 17-year-old girl who had been left on her own, of a stranger who became family of the foundation, now helping young mothers. He never named me, but everyone could see who he meant. The screen behind him shifted between photos of outreach programs, scholarship recipients, and then briefly an image of me holding him as a baby in a shelter kitchen. Gasps rose softly across the room. My mother's smile faltered. She leaned toward my father, whispering something sharp. He kept his eyes fixed on the stage, jaw tight. Their hands clutched their champagne flutes like anchors. They still didn't realize the next part of the program wasn't theirs to script. Lance moved closer to the stage, a folder tucked under his arm. His calm presence felt like a silent countdown. Around the room, phones glowed as guests began recording, sensing something unscripted was about to happen. The energy shifted low, chatter stilled, silverware paused mid-air. I stepped a little farther into the light but didn't speak. My role was to let the truth unfold without fanfare. The orchestra had stopped playing between courses, leaving only the sound of my son's voice, recounting milestones they had never witnessed. First steps, first words, first day of medical school. Each line landed like a quiet hammer on old stone. At table 1, my father adjusted his tie, glancing toward the MC as if to signal for a change. My mother dabbed her lipstick with a napkin, eyes darting between me and the stage. They were preparing to stand, to claim credit, to spin a story. They didn't notice the big screen flickering, ready for the next segment. The tension tasted metallic on my tongue. For years I had imagined shouting, demanding an apology. Instead, I simply smoothed my dress and waited. Silent power felt heavier than any words I could have thrown. I caught Lance's eye. He gave the smallest nod. The MC announced a short video message from someone who helped inspire tonight's work. Lights dimmed further. A still of Elena's face appeared, radiant and unafraid. My parents' shoulders stiffened, phones tilted upward like a field of mirrors. The air in the ballroom grew charged like the pause before a storm. Elena's recorded voice filled the room like a bell. "If you're watching this," she said, "then the people who once turned their backs on Olivia are in this very room." My parents flinched at the sound of my name. She named them without naming, recounting the suitcase, the portrait face down, the silence they'd left behind. Every sentence landed slow and measured, each one another crack in the mask they wore. Around the ballroom, people shifted in their seats. Some guests turned to look at table 1, their expressions tightening. The glow of phones captured everything, the trembling hands, the darting eyes. Even the servers paused, holding trays mid-air. I stood still, my pulse calm, as if I were finally watching a door close after years of standing open. Elena spoke of the trust she'd built for my son, the restaurants, the investments, the scholarships, all protected beyond reach. "They can't touch it. They can't touch you. Be free," she said. My mother's hand twitched toward her glass. My father's face flushed red. They were beginning to realize this wasn't a tribute at all, but a mirror held up in front of them. I didn't speak. I let the weight of Elena's words and the images on the screen contracts, signatures, dates carry the message. My son remained at the podium, his hands steady on the edges, his eyes scanning the crowd. He knew this moment was coming. He'd practiced his lines for weeks. Lance shifted his folder, a quiet signal. The screen froze on a single page of a document, bold signatures at the bottom. Guests murmured. My parents stared at the names they had written 2 decades earlier as if hoping the ink might vanish. Inside me, something long clenched began to loosen. This wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning they had set in motion themselves. I drew a slow breath and stepped forward a fraction, just enough for the cameras to catch my face, but not my words. Silent power, steady and unflinching. The MC cleared his throat, announcing that a legal representative would clarify certain matters after the video. My father half rose from his chair, then sat back down. My mother whispered furiously, her lipstick smudging the napkin. Around them, the polite smiles of donors had turned into cool, watchful stares. The rising action was nearly complete. Lance rose from his chair like a man walking toward a verdict. He carried the folder of documents as if it weighed nothing but the hush that fell over the ballroom said otherwise. My son stood at the podium, hands clasped, letting the silence stretch. This was the moment we had been preparing for, not a fight, but a showing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lance said, his voice, "even there are papers you should see." He held up the abandonment contract, the projector throwing every word and signature 10 feet high. Gasps rippled through the audience. My parents' names gleamed under the lights ink that had outlived excuses. My father shot up, face crimson. "This is out of context," he barked, but his words echoed flat in the hall. My mother reached for the microphone at their table, but her hands trembled, knocking over a glass instead. Water bled across the white linen like a spreading stain. I stayed still, silent. This was not my speech to give. It was my life to stand in. My son looked at them, at the people who had tried to rewrite his story, and said calmly, "You signed away not only my mother, but me. Legally, I am not your grandson. Tonight, you tried to claim me as an asset, but I am not for sale." His voice was steady, the surgical precision of someone who knows exactly where to cut. Phones rose higher, little rectangles of light, capturing every detail. Owen shifted at the edge of the table as if trying to melt into his chair. Lance clicked the remote again, revealing the emails between Owen and my parents. Lines of text pushed the right buttons, asset to be recovered, glared from the screen. Guests leaned forward, reading for themselves. "This is manipulation for profit," Lance said. "It's also harassment. We've documented every message." He placed the printed chain on the podium. My father tried to snatch it, but a security guard stepped between them. My son didn't flinch. "Lance taught me how to catch a baseball," he said softly into the mic. "He came to every surgery observation. He's my father in every way that matters." A murmur rolled across the room, warm and low like a tide turning. I watched my parents' shoulders slump, their masks slipping as the crowd stared. The power they had assumed would protect them had dissolved under their own signatures. And still I said nothing. Just a slight nod to Lance continue. The reckoning was unfolding exactly as planned. Owen tried to slip toward the exit, head down, but the security staff closed ranks before he could disappear. Lance's voice stayed level. "Mr. Blake, please remain. This involves you too." The screen behind them shifted to show his messages, requests for upfront payments, plans to push my emotional buttons. Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. The narrative my parents had built crumbled word by word. I gripped the edge of my chair, breathing steady. For 20 years I had pictured this moment, but I never imagined it would be so quiet, no shouting, just facts and eyes. My mother rose halfway, her Chanel jacket catching the light. "We made a mistake," she said into a nearby microphone, voice cracking. "One mistake." I stood at last. One mistake. The words left me cool and clear. "You gave me 10 minutes to pack. You turned my portrait face down. You signed away my unborn child." The room fell into a collective hush. Even the servers froze mid-step. My father's jaw worked, but no sound came. Sigurd remained at the podium, his back straight. "You watched me grow from a distance online," he said to Owen. "Graduations, milestones, surgeries. And still you waited until now to reach out, not to know me, but to use me. That ends tonight." His voice didn't rise, but its steadiness was louder than any shout. Lance closed the folder. "Under state law," he said, "continued harassment after formal notice allows us to seek restraining orders and criminal charges. We prefer you leave quietly." He glanced at his watch. "You have 9 minutes." A digital clock above the stage ticked audibly. Guests shifted in their seats, the collective weight of silence pressing in. My parents looked at each other, eyes darting to the exits, but hundreds of phones kept recording. I didn't move. I let the moment stretch a living proof that patience can be a weapon. My mother's hands fluttered over her handbag. My father's shoulders sagged under the gaze of people he'd once commanded. Owen's lips moved in a silent prayer or plea. This was the turn, no raised voices, no dramatic gestures. Just 3 people who had once defined my worth standing exposed before a crowd that now saw everything. The power was gone from them, and I didn't have to take it back. They had handed it away. The process server stepped forward, papers in hand, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Robert Harrison, Margaret Harrison, Owen Blake. He announced, his voice cutting through the ballroom murmur like a gavel. "You are being served with emergency restraining orders." The click of camera shutters filled the pause. My mother's face drained of color. My father stared at the embossed seals as though they were written in another language. "These orders are effective immediately," the officer added. "No contact, no messages, no third parties." He held each packet until reluctant hands reached to take them. The crowd parted slightly, leaving a clear path to the doors. I stayed at the podium beside Sigurd, my hands folded. No triumph, just a long exhale after years of holding my breath. My father tried to summon his old authority. "This isn't over," but the officer's calm reply cut him off. "It's consequence." A low ripple of assent moved through the audience. My mother clutched her handbag like a lifeline, eyes darting between the exits and the phones still recording. "You'll regret this, Michelle," she hissed across the space. I met her gaze steady. "The only thing I regret," I said quietly, "is spending 17 years believing I needed your love." The words landed with a hush, sharper than applause. They gathered themselves, Owen trailing like a shadow. At the door, my father turned once more. "That boy is our blood." Before the crowd could react, Sigurd's voice rose calm and clear. "You bled my mother dry and left her for dead. Elena gave her real blood, the kind that matters." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Security held the doors open. My parents and Owen walked out their steps, heavy against the marble. The click of the latch as the doors closed behind them echoed louder than any speech. Phones lowered slowly. The space they'd occupied at table 1 sat empty, a hollow in the glittering room. Sigurd stepped back to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "let me show you what we're really here to celebrate." He gestured toward the massive screen, and the renderings of the new Foundation Center appeared: bright classrooms, play areas, a clinic wing. Gasps turned to warm applause. I moved to stand beside him. "Every young mother who comes to us," I said, "will get what I got from Elena. Not judgment, but support. Not shame, but dignity. Not abandonment, but family." My voice stayed low, but carried, filling the room with something steadier than anger. The applause swelled until the chandeliers trembled with sound, then softened into a standing ovation. I caught Maria's eye, a 17-year-old holding her baby at the edge of the crowd, and nodded for her to come forward. Sigurd bent to her level, handing her a scholarship certificate with both hands. She clutched it to her chest, tears streaming. Cameras flashed again, but now for a different story. "This is Maria Santos," Sigurd said. "Valedictorian, single mom, future doctor." The room erupted. For a heartbeat, I saw Elena in every kind face looking back at us. Her portrait glowed on the screen above, fresh orchids beneath it. We had replaced the image of my parents with something permanent and living. Lance joined us on stage, sliding his arm around my waist with quiet pride. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The hospital board chair stepped forward, shaking Sigurd's hand. "We're proud to partner with the Foundation," he said into the mic. This is what legacy really looks like. Later in the hallway outside the ballroom, I pressed my back to the cool wall and let the noise wash over me. No screaming, no gloating, just the steady pulse of relief. Lance found me there holding 2 glasses of water. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm free," I said. "For the first time in 20 years, I'm completely free." 3 weeks later, headlines carried the fallout Harrison Industries stock tumbling. My father voted out as CEO. Owen indicted for bankruptcy fraud. I didn't clip the articles. I didn't even read the comments. The only update I cared about was the center's first resident moving in, a girl who reminded me of myself at 17. That night at our own kitchen table, Sigard carved a roast the way Elena had taught him, telling us about the 3 lives he'd saved that week. Lance poured wine from Elena's collection. The TV stayed off. We'd rather look at her portrait than any screen. When the plates were cleared, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small ring, and set it in front of Lance. "Elena always said to speak up for what you want," I murmured. "Will you make this official?" He laughed, eyes shining. "Yes. Absolutely yes." In the candlelight, I could almost see Elena smiling. This was family. Not perfect, not traditional, but real, chosen, permanent. And somewhere in a guest house in Arizona, 2 strangers I once called parents were learning what I'd known for years: some choices can't be undone, but better ones can be made every single day. If you've ever had to choose between blood and peace, remember this: real family shows up when the world walks away. Like and subscribe if this story reminded you that justice exists even when it takes 20 years. Share it with anyone who needs to hear they deserve unconditional love. Comment family if you believe in chosen families, not forced ones. The ballroom lights have long faded, but the image lingers. Chairs pushed back, a door closing softly, and a young mother stepping into a brighter future. In that quiet, you feel the weight lift. Sometimes strength isn't a shout. It's a steady hand opening a new door, proving worth without asking permission.